what role do you believe credibility and expertise play in effective leadership, and how can leaders work to establish and leverage these qualities?
Credibility and expertise are fundamental to being an effective leader. Credibility is because
So, how do you approach advising clients on leadership development or corporate governance or organization performance management? And what are the common challenges you face while in this
one
process?
of the first things I think that any professional needs to think about, especially when you're in an advisory role, leading this kind of change, particularly around leadership. Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Karima Mariama Arthur. I am a corporate attorney. I've been so for over 20 years. I'm also an executive leadership advisor, an advisor to organizations on the topic of corporate governance and organizational management. It is my joy to help organizations and individuals find those gaps where leadership effectiveness has become something that is obsolete and sort of re-guide the way. That is the work that guides everything that I do. I am an author. Poised for Excellence is the name of my current book. It is a book that I wrote because I wanted leaders to understand that leadership is always available. Excellence is always available to all of us. But if we make the conscientious choice to be a leader in our personal and professional life on a daily basis, we can always become better. And it doesn't matter what you did before or what's coming, there's always an opportunity to lead and to lead effectively.
True. So,
Yes.
could you please share some of the fundamental principles of effective leadership that you discuss in your book and how they can be applied in various industries and organizations?
Yeah, that's a really important question. One of the first ones that I want to talk about is something that I was talking about earlier in a course I was leading on corporate governance, and that is that effective leaders are lifelong learners. And sometimes, as executives or very accomplished professionals, we fall into the trap of relying on our education, our past performance, the roles we've held as being all we ever need to be successful, all we ever need to lead our organizations and the other entities that we deal with. But what I know for sure is that the number one reason why executives fail have less to do with the fact of the education received or the certification. It has everything to do with those fundamental skill sets that we call soft skills and not
Mhm.
applying them at the executive level. And so your capacity to continue to learn is fundamental to you being a leader, because once you stop learning, you actually forfeit the right to lead and to teach others. So that's the first chapter in the book under the principles, because I believe that it was such the foundation of really learning at that level of understanding what leadership is. A second principle that I'll call to your attention is that of emotional intelligence, and it falls under
Mhm.
that umbrella of fundamental skill sets that go beyond education and practical technical expertise. The reason why emotional intelligence is so critically important is because of the five ways that Dr. Goleman talks about them. And he talks about them in the sense of self-awareness, understanding who you are at a very deep level, which also allows you to understand other people and where they're coming from. That awareness makes you intimately involved with your own emotions, but also to influence and lead those of others. Self-regulation is another component that comes up, but it talks about really emotional intelligence on a spectrum, because we often think, oh gosh, we're human, but if we have an emotional outburst, it can hurt us. But there's also the other side about raising your voice at all, like speaking truth to power, being an advocate for yourself on the other side of the spectrum. So regulating yourself is really a twofold process. It's a dangerous sword, even, or a double-edged sword, as we would say, because we need to be able to advocate for ourselves, to speak truth to power, but also understand that at certain times we don't need to say everything to let it all sort of be vomited out. And so those are two really important principles. And if you have more questions about principles, I can discuss those later, but I don't want to go through the whole book and tell you about all the principles, but those are two critical ones that I think are really important.
Great. So, how do you approach advising clients on leadership development or corporate governance or organization performance management? And what are the common challenges you face while in this process?
That's another really good question. And one of the first things I think that any professional needs to think about, especially when you're in an advisory role, leading this kind of change, particularly around leadership, is to find out where the blind spots are. Meet people where they are. You can't just vomit, whatever your script is, whatever your knowledge base is into the organization or the individual. You need to meet them where they are, understand what they're doing, find the gaps where there may be maybe some processes that are not working, figure out why, get to root causes. We use something called the fishbone diagram to do that, to understand why they aren't meeting their goals, why they're not performing at the level. Then after you reach that diagnostic, then you can go prescriptive and you can talk to them about what can work, why this can work, but taking baby steps and really looking at this process as I look at risk, because this really is really about risk management when it comes down to it, like about the future and also the present, and how do we meet that gap, is understanding that we have to identify, what's wrong. First, figure out like where we are. But then you have to assess and see how much of a risk is this potential. Like if we don't address this issue, what might happen if we don't address it? Figure out some protocols that you can apply to make the situation better. Then you have to sit back and see if those are working, kind of let them marinate, and then start the process all over again. And that's why I talk about this process as being iterative like risk, because it's not something that you can do and be done. You have to consistently be checked in and go through a process constantly.
Yeah. So I can see your passion towards this field. So is there any particular reason or what influenced you to go into this field?
Oh, I love that question. I love that question. And the reason why I decided to delve into leadership effectiveness is because I mentioned before, I am a corporate attorney, but I
Mhm.
felt that my mission at some point was larger than just being attorney. You say just being attorney. I know that it's an awesome responsibility in and of itself, but I wanted to do a little bit more with my education and training. And what I had found in dealing with so many of our corporate clients is there were issues with leadership, and I wanted to be able to take my knowledge and experience, also learning more about how to lead individuals in that way so they could show up better and stronger in their respective fields. And so now, as you've correctly called out, it is a passion of mine that I indulge on a daily basis. It keeps me up late, it gets me up early, all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what role do you believe credibility and expertise play in effective leadership, and how can leaders work to establish and leverage these qualities?
Yeah, I think that credibility and expertise are fundamental to being an effective leader. Credibility is because leadership is all about influence. And if people don't believe in you, believe that you're a good example of what you represent, it's very difficult to get buy-in. People are not going to want to follow you. They're not going to allow whatever influence you think you have to permeate them and then to glom on and to help you to achieve your goal. So you have to be credible. People have to believe in what you're doing. You have to believe in what you're doing. Otherwise, it bears out. Being a subject matter expertise often also is tantamount to having that credibility, because if you say that you can do something and you say you have past performance, we want to see it. We want you to put it on the table, because you're going to need those skills to lead us in whatever process. So you really need to understand what you're doing at a very deep level so that we can actually see the results being produced from the fruit of your labor. So that's critical. How do people develop subject matter, so that substantive expertise, and how do they develop credibility? Well, you can develop subject matter expertise in a number of ways, up to and including your education. But that's not the only way. You can get certifications. You can
Mhm.
indulge in lifelong learning. You can read. You can ask questions of other experts and apply that. So critical in that is not just getting the information here. We need to bring it down on a mind mode and apply it on a daily basis. I tell people, don't wait until D-Day to bring all the skills and practice up. Practice on a regular basis so that when you're required to show up a certain way, it's more like, I feel this, I know what I'm doing, I've been doing it all the time, and it's not so performatory. So you have to be able to do that. And when you do that over time, you begin to get credibility, you begin to get traction. People see you for who you are, and they are saying, yes, she's credible. We've seen her work, we can attest to what she is, and then you become credible.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of sitting and waiting for the right time, it's important to
Yes.
practice each and every day and to excel into that particular field. Yeah, that's amazing. So you have a
Yes.
lot of experience, you have a lot of knowledge. I can see your passion towards it. So could you please share any specific example of a client where you have worked with them and how your guidance helped them to achieve personal or professional excellence?
Yes, and it's interesting though, one of the examples that I'm going to talk about has everything to do with sort of the questions you talked about before about around credibility. And I had a client who was, a really big personality. Um,
Mhm.
People glommed on to this particular person just because they always seem to be passionate about their work, and they're like, "Oh, we want to work with them." And they had said that they had all of this experience, but what I came to know is that they really didn't have the level of experience that they were claiming to other clients, and it started to hurt them in the marketplace. It started to hurt them when they were job hunting because they'd show up, and then within 2 weeks the supervisors would say, wait a minute, we hired you to do X, and we don't really see that. I want to set you up for success, but we don't really see you performing. And what I realized is that she had an overinflated opinion of what she knew and of her success. But in actuality, there were a lot of gaps. I told you that we're good on identifying the gaps. And so what I was able to do was show her where there were gaps in her substantive experience and that it was hurting her in the marketplace, and really got her to embrace that because she didn't want to. She wanted to believe she knew everything, she's ready to go, but in actuality, she was not ready. So we work with her and getting the kind of tools and information she needs to build herself up so she could be more credible in the marketplace and start to get to gain traction. And that's part of it. Like sometimes being able to accept constructive feedback is really part of the process. And again, I don't care how high you are up in the food chain, you really have to be open to constructive criticism when it's good for growth.
Yes, that's true. So my last question to you is, if you had the attention of the whole world for 5 minutes, what would you say to them?
Gosh, I would probably tell them to pay closer attention
Mm-hmm.
to the needs within themselves, their inner child. And the reason why I would say that is because, we lose so much of those childlike qualities as we become older. We lose creativity, we lose wonder, we lose that feeling that we could do anything in this world and be great at it. And sometimes, so many times, we have to tap back into that and say, wait a minute, what were the feelings I had as a child when I felt that I was invincible? How can I tap back into that as an adult and be great right now? So I would ask the world to tap into their inner child, to embrace him or her and run with it. Go and be great.
True, that's amazing message. So that's all from my side, Karima. Do you want to add anything into this?
I would ask everyone to consider picking up Poised for Excellence. That is the name of my book. If you are keen on your leadership journey, if you are keen on becoming the best possible leader you can be, go grab the book, take your time, read through the principles. There are 41. 41. I know that seems like a lot, but here's the rub. In that book, it's not a kind of book that I would say you should read cover to cover. You will read it based on the subject matter that you need at the time when you need it, and it'll give you the tools you need to be successful in that area of your leadership journey. So go pick that up and be excellence in motion. Because as I said in the book, we know that it's always available, but as leaders, our charge is to choose excellence on a daily basis.
Definitely, definitely. I think I'm the first one who is going to pick up, and definitely the listeners is also going to.
Thank you.
Great, Karima. Thank you so much for your time.
You too. Have a great day.